Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Daniel of Lake of Tears to talk about Ominous, out February 19th on AFM Records. How's it going?
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the time today to chat about the upcoming new album. And the first question that I have for you is this an album that has itself divided into 9 chapters, or are these 9 songs that make one full book? How do you see this album?
Oh, actually, I think you can see it. I see it from different perspective, but it is a story in a sense. It's all based on a story actually, and so all songs are connected together, and I guess you can call them chapters in the story in some ways. But I would say 8 because the ninth song is it's not part of the story, and that's why I call it a bonus track.
Yeah, I felt like it was, how can I put it this way? It didn't impact everything that happened up until that point, but it's still a very interesting track, and I want to talk about that song later on. How do you define the journey of this album?
How do I define it? Well, on the purest level, I would say it's a story about illness and depression. This is since my own leukemia and the following years, or let's say the following decade of quite depressive things, and that's on the deepest level. And on top of that, I have made it into a like an easier story to follow, more linear story, because illness and depression doesn't really give. It's not easy to portray with music in that way. It will be like all over the place if I would have just based it on that. So on top of that story, I have made this cosmic story about the cosmonaut and the two ominous brothers.
One of the aspects of this journey that this album has is the way you connected the tracks. Like sometimes one song, almost halfway through it, starts to become what the next song is going to be like.
Yes.
I thought this was absolutely mind blowing
Cool.
because it was such a trip. You completely lose track of where you are on the record because you don't know where one song ends and where the other one song starts. You really have to listen to the whole record from beginning to end. What kind of challenges does this create for you when you're putting together a record that has this sort of a unique nature to it?
Well, first of all, I must say I'm really happy that you say put it that way, because far from everybody is understanding this record, and of course it's for me up until now, at least since it haven't been released, quite frustrating to be talking to people that doesn't understand the record. And they haven't even seen the pictures. I don't even know if you have seen all the pictures that are connected to the story as well.
No,
Uh,
no, the pictures I haven't seen, but definitely I've dove deep into this record already.
Very cool. And I must say that it hasn't really been easy. I mean, the basic thoughts have been quite easy. It's like depressive thought. It can be like, what can I say, a panic attack, based on a panic attack, or based on hard to breathe, or just based on sorrow that you lose your friends. But then to put it into all this story, it's been such a long time, so I've had really time to think about this, and I am quite. I've always been quite great, let's say, with mathematics and stuff like this. So there are a lot of thoughts into this. And as you said, the songs go into each other and like follow on each other. And that's one of the main reason, like I have been breaking the norms of the common form for music today with the, let's say, the easiest one is the verse, chorus, verse, chorus. So you can't really find, you can find some songs that are like that in here, but most songs are built on, I would say, maybe the easiest way to explain it, some kind of movie music, because they're like, it can be like a long build up with just a pumping sound or a stressing sound, and there's really no chorus, but you have to wait another while to get into these tops. So yeah,
You know,
it's
the great thing about this album is I listened to the album maybe about a month ago, And the moment that the first time that I listened to the album was about a month ago. And the first time that I listened to the album, the first thing that I did was send an email to the label to say, I have to chat with you,
Cool.
because I thought this album is just so outside the box. It's just so different from everything else that everybody is doing. The uniqueness of this record, to me, is just outstanding. The uniqueness alone is outstanding. When you were putting the final touches on the album, do you have a sense of how unique, how different, how interesting this album is?
Well, actually, towards the end, I had, because then other some other people have started to get involved as well, like the technicians in the studio and the guy who recorded and mixed, and also a friend Vesa, who played the bass on it. But from the beginning, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it that way. I've always liked to write what I feel like, and that's not like, I guess maybe in the beginning of the 90s it was connected to a certain genre, because you have to start somewhere. But even after a few years, I didn't really care so much about that anymore. So I haven't really thought about making it unique in genre-wise like this, but I have put thought into not making it like a normative record, or like a common record today, and I'm a little bit proud of that, I must say.
Yeah, and you should be. It's sometimes it takes a little bit of courage to go against what everything else expects from you.
I think it takes a lot of courage, but because I think a lot of people in the music business are quite afraid to lose what they have, if I put it like that. And
Yeah.
I guess most of them don't have so much, so it's maybe understandable.
One of the aspects of the album is, at least to me, I felt, was the diversity that the soundscape of the record has, which plays really well on how you connected the tracks. Where does that diversity come from? Is that from your own influences, or is that from the journey itself that you built within the record that really called for those changes to happen from track to track?
I would say, of course, it comes from both those, because the story in itself. Uh, when I'm writing music, I'm often like, you hear a certain sound or you get a certain idea. It can be from a title or from a words or something. But if it's about sound, I usually don't record the sound at first. I wait until it comes back to me somehow. Uh, so in that way, I would like to think that the story has built its own sounds. But of course. Uh, you have to start somewhere, and I have my equipment that I use, that I started with, my electric guitar and these kind of riffs that I started out with, and all these bands that I started out with. So I think it becomes a mixture of those things. uh, but I would like to think on a more like higher poetical level that it is the story. But of course there are some things, quite plain and simple things. I mean, I use my guitar and I write my riffs, so it's a mixture.
With all this diversity that the album has, I still felt like this is not an album that comes across, and a lot of it has to do with the structure, with that bleeding in from one song into the next. But considering all the diversity on the record, sometimes when you have albums like that, you almost feel like you're listening to a compilation, like a best of, like a greatest hits, because the songs don't feel that they connect together. They don't feel like they belong in the same record. This
Right.
album, I didn't feel like it had that issue at all, regardless of where the journey took me. I always felt like I was within the bigger picture of that journey, if you will, which is the whole record. What do you attribute to the fact that this album has that sense of dividedness because it gives you different looks, but at the same time togetherness because it still keeps you together?
Yeah. Well, again, I must say I'm really happy that you feel that way, because that was uh, p- one of my intentions with the record, uh, I am quite genreless, but I realize, and especially maybe since our last album, Ill Will, that doing this kind of thing with a lot of different styles on the songs, it can be quite challenging for the listener. But actually, I must say, when I buy a record, I would most often like it to sound a little bit different from song to song. If it's not Ramones, then it's totally okay for me. Uh, but otherwise, I think. because I've been in this business for 30 years now and have heard so many bands and so many records, and I think you have to take the chance. At least I felt I had to do it. I have to take a chance to do this kind of diverse music thing, but at the same time, there is this connecting feeling. At least I wanted it to because it all comes from the same place.
Yeah, and I felt that the way you constructed the album, the structure of the album, really helped that togetherness. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because there's no pause, there's no sense of a stop and a break. There's just a, it's like a river. It just continues to
yeah,
flow from the time it's born all the way until it meets the sea.
yeah, yeah. That
It,
was
it,
my intention. That's cool. Really cool.
yeah,
Good take.
that's how I took it. One thing that a lot of people will always talk about, specifically, I mention a lot on my review when I talk about this record, which is atmosphere, the way it makes you feel, the way you perceive the songs, the mood that puts you in. How do you define the atmosphere of this album?
Oh, how do I define it? I mean, as I said, it's for me, it's from inside a story of illness and depression, and I just primarily tried to get these moods. So I don't really know how to define it from the outside because I'm like from the inside looking out, and to define it, I would have to use like I don't know. I don't know. I think I would have to be someone from the outside looking in for the first time to be able to define it from that kind of perspective. I'm not sure I can really define it from inside. I mean, I can say it's quite dark, and that's of course how it is. But there is also some hope in it.
Is there do you do something as far as the vocals are concerned? Like, are the vocals driven by the lyrical content of the record itself, in terms of the
Yeah,
style, in terms of the approach that you take?
yeah, of course, everything. I wanted everything to fit together, every little detail, and I think I almost got it. So of course, the vocals and the singings, the lyrics are connected, and like for the more vulnerable part, I was really trying to get into this feeling, and it wasn't actually hard because this feeling isn't quite over yet.
Still
Uh,
fresh.
yeah.
Was that the writing of the lyric process? Was that a little bit therapeutical then for you?
I would say it was a lot of therapeutical work, but both with music and the lyrics, and also, I mean, this was written and rewritten and rearranged, and as I said, I had many years to think about this, and I love to think about the things, especially like mathematics and philosophy. So I've changed so much and calculated stuff and moved stuff around. So even though it may sound quite simple on the surface, because the riffs are actually quite simple and direct, there are a lot of thought in it.
So this is an album that, for the listener like myself, who doesn't have the inside picture of what's happening, sounds and feels very organic. But on the other hand, from you, it feels like it's a little bit more calculated. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that would be correct. Put it like that.
So it's an interesting dynamic. From calculated comes the opposite side, which is feels like it's just a natural output.
Yeah, but I must say that the actual recording, I wanted it to feel because since I've done this record on my computer, and you know, with the computer you have all these stiff drums and stiff bass plugins, and so I wanted the actual manifestation to be as raw as possible as it could be here. So we didn't actually take many takes and copied stuff. I wanted it to have that natural flow on the surface because I'm quite aware that there are like synthesized sounds and stuff like that, and those are a bit more square-like, or how do you put them?
Yeah, they're a little bit more mechanical, if you will.
Mechanical, yes.
You mentioned the bonus track in Gloom.
Yeah.
It's a very different song from everything else that you have on the record. What drove you to put that extra bonus track there at the end and have it be so different?
Well, first of all, I must say that when I wrote it, it was I think I immediately felt that it was a very I thought, a very good track. So I couldn't skip it in any way. I just couldn't just. But at the same time, I didn't want to make it a part of the story, because that would be like me forcing the song to become something else. So it was actually, the song was too good to be left out, and I wanted to have it there.
I honestly, it's one of my favorite tracks of the record, and
Cool.
it almost feels, it feels strange because it doesn't feel like it belongs to the overall fluidity of the album, but the song is so good, like you said, that you're like, oh, I'll take it. It's almost like a bonus track at the end of the credits of a movie.
Yeah, it is, and it's not directly connected, because the story is. I try to make it in a first person sense all the time. That you're, except for one song when you're thinking back, the third song, but it's some kind of conclusion. It's like taking being in the universe and then taking a step back and reflecting about the universe. So it's perhaps connected in that way.
It also, I'd also felt from an atmosphere, from a mood, from an overall soundscape, there was some similarities to the rest of the record. It's not like you created a song that's reggae and the rest of the album was something else, you know.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the same instrumentation. I mean, the solo strings that I have all over the place on this one, well, is one of the things here. Except for the stand-up bass, which I was really happy that we could find a guy who played the stand-up bass, because that's amazing, I think.
Yeah, it added a different aroma to the song. It gave a
Yeah,
little bit of depth and made the sound a little bit more rich.
yeah, really.
Uh, what is the most fulfilling aspect for you now that you look back at this record? Is it having the final record put together, or do you really enjoy the process of working through it until you get to that final product?
Uh, well, as I said, the base for the story is not an enjoyable place. I wouldn't really want to spend another decade in this kind of black hole. But I must say, uh, just the process of making it, of course, it has given me something. It's given me strength to lift myself up out of this hole, and you know, sometimes I just get goosebumps when you are in a couple of years into the story, and things are like a puzzle that start to come together. That's a quite amazing feeling. So if I could have that feeling, but skip this other part, that would be
Skip the
that
nightmare.
yeah, that would be the best, I think. Because to make music, it's such a, I don't know how to describe it. I guess most of the musicians think that it's some fantastic thing. But I must say now afterwards, for me, as it always actually has been for me, the to find out that people have gotten this record, not like that there are millions of people that have gotten, but that some people have gotten it, really gotten it into them. It feels like it has penetrated them in some way. And I get these messages and mails from people, they're calling me like you're like a brother, and that's for me, I think the greatest reward that there could ever be. There are people like all over the world that are expressing these kind of feelings, and maybe even it can help some people who are in a similar situation, to take them out of it, to take them through it, or whatever.
Sometimes it's important to feel like you're not alone. And listening to an album like this gives you a sense of togetherness. Like somebody else has gone through this journey, and I'm not while I'm maybe going through it alone, there's somebody out there that understands exactly what I'm going through. I think that's
Yeah,
a very important inner message that this album has in store for the listener.
yeah, yeah, and I really hope so. I was actually thinking about it the other day, and I think when the Danish Norwegian band Aqua came out, I don't know if you remember them, Barbie
Yeah,
Girl song.
yeah.
Uh, I don't know if it was that moment in time, but I remember that I was thinking a lot back then that this is not the kind of music that helps me when I am in a bad place. But I noticed that it was helping a lot of other people when they were feeling down. They could just stand up and jump and sing along. But for me, it was the other way around. I was actually feeling more bad when I heard this kind of music, and that was one of those kind of moments that I've been reflecting about.
I have one last question for you, and that is, in a time like this, in a time of a pandemic, with all this uncertainty in the world, what are your expectations for this album?
Um, oh, I don't know if really the pandemic has changed my expectations in any way. I really don't have any big expectations. I mean, I've been it for so long, and of course, Lake of Tears has become a known name in some parts of the genre, but it's still a very small band. But I really do hope that this record can reach out to people, but because I think it deserves it. It's a bit difficult to say about something that I have done myself, but I think this record deserves it. It has something there, and yeah. But about the pandemic, I don't think for me it hasn't really changed much. I am. Quite a guy who's started to live more and more isolated, and I just go to the local store mostly. So it hasn't really changed much. And
It's just regular life as it is.
almost it's like sometimes even enjoyable. I wouldn't say that, of course it's not, because it's a terrible thing, but sometimes it feels like it has been autumn for a year, and I like autumn because I like when people get into this kind of deeper thought process, and I think it comes
More introspective.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I want to thank you for making this album. For a guy like me who listens to a lot of music, this album was a breath of fresh air, and I think we all need something like that every so often. So different, so unique, so interesting. Love the records. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank you for taking the time today to chat with me about the album.
And I would like to thank you, because those words that you say, they make me really happy. It's fantastic to hear, actually.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. All the best. Stay safe. Stay healthy. I'm not going to say stay isolated because that's already a given.
Yeah.
And all the best with the album release on February 19th.
Thank you very much. Take
Take
care.
care.